Okay. You okay to start, Maya?
Yes, Chair, it's recording.
Right, thank you. Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee of Monday, the 18th of October. Please note that today's meeting will be recorded. The recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet and it may be used for training purposes by the Democratic Services Department. All attendees will be in view of the camera, and by attending you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings being used. We start the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Councillor Darren Roberts, Chair.
And I believe everyone's present, Mair. There's no other
Yes,
apology.
Chair. No other. Everyone else is present, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Take into account A and B. No one's indicating any declaration of interest. We then go on to item 3 on the agenda, and that is the statement of accounts, including the annual governance statement for 2020-21. That's the report of the Chief Executive, pages 5 to 170. And what we will do is, before we carry out the vote on approving the statement of accounts, after Steve Jones and co have spoken there, we'll go straight on to the Audit Wales audit of accounts, which is being dealt with by Neil Hollis from Audit Wales. So, Steve, you're going to take us through the statement of accounts, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, so what we've got is this report is the audited final statement of accounts for last year. So that is the financial year ended the 31st of March 21. And you'll see that the accounts themselves are included as Appendix A. But what I intend to do is to go through this narrative report, which is an executive summary of the statement of accounts. So in going through section 1, that sets an introduction, and it basically states that under the Accounts and Audit Wales regs, the accounts have to be compiled by the 31st of May, and then the accounts have to be audited and approved by Council by the 31st of August. But because of the ongoing pandemic, those timescales have been revised and extended. So the extended dates are in that the accounts have to be compiled by the 31st July and approved by Council by the end of November. And as you recall, the actual draft accounts were authorised by myself on July the 15th and were reported to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 6th of September. So as I said, the actual accounts themselves are included as Appendix A, and the intention is then that the accounts will be approved at the Council of the 3rd of November. So paragraph 4 sets out that the accounts have been compiled and in accordance with the account practices and have adhered to the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting and also to the International Financial Reporting Standards. Paragraph 5 then, that touches on that we've also included the jointly controlled operations, and we've consolidated the Council's share within our accounts, and those are in respect of the Siwyd Crematorium, the Central South Consortium, and the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. So as we go into section 6 of the accounts, section 6 of the report, that outlines then that, as I said earlier, that the draft accounts came to the Governance and Audit Committee on the 6th of September. And then we go into the figures themselves going into paragraph 7. And 7.1 then deals with the revenue outturn. And I'm happy to say that nothing has changed since the draft accounts. And we still have a revenue surplus of nearly £4.5 million for last financial year. And as you recall, we set out in the draft report the actual reasons for that surplus. Then on to paragraph 7.2. That outlines our capital outturn for last financial year. And again, that's on a par with the draft accounts. And you can see there that we have a surplus of £3.7 million, or we have an underspend of £3.7 million against our capital, but monies can be transferred forward into next financial year. So 7.3 then outlines the impact on our reserves. And as is evident, our general reserves have increased from £4.7 million to £5.334 million, and now equate to 4% of our budgeted net revenue expenditure for this current financial year. And that complies with our Council Corporate Reserves policy, which states that the general reserve should lie in between 3.5% and 4% of our net revenue expenditure. So that's the accounts in terms of the figures. So also included as part of the statement of accounts is the annual governance statement. And again, under the Accounts and Audit Wales regs, we have to report at least once a year, and that's included as part of the statement of accounts. And we have to report on the effectiveness of the Council's system of internal control and the governance arrangements with the annual statement of accounts. So that AGS can be seen as part of Appendix A and the statement of accounts. Paragraph 8.5 then, that states a new compliance for 21-22, but a transition for the statement of accounts in 2021 is the Financial Management Code of Practice. And so we have included as part of the annual governance statement how we've complied with the Financial Management Code of Practice. So that gives a snapshot and of the statement of accounts, Chair. And if I stop there and ask if there are any questions at this point.
Do you, before bringing Councillor Chaplin, do you want to hear from Neil Hollis from Audit Wales, or I can just take questions on this actual statement of accounts now, if you...
I think I'd probably happy, Chair, if we take questions on the accounts first, and then we'll go into the Audit Wales report.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Councillor Chaplin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. On page 8, under contributions and recharges, it mentions redundancies and EPP stroke slippage. What is EPP stroke slippage?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. EPP stands for Early Pension Payments, and it's in respect of the voluntary early retirement scheme that we've operated over a number of years. And as you recall, the early pension payment costs are paid over three years. So that basically shows the cost is for the repayment of those early retirement pension costs.
Yeah, what's the slippage? That means it's more than expected.
No, I think that's an historical word, I think, which shouldn't be there for this current financial year.
Okay,
so that's something that it was included in the past, where potentially we had slippage in some of the efficiency savings, but that
Okay.
doesn't actually apply for this financial year.
So that could be removed, thank you. At the bottom there, it says provision for further commitments, 118,000. Do we know what those further commitments are?
Again, that was when we actually set the budget for 2021. There were a couple of issues which weren't exactly known with any certainty at that time. And one of them was the award for pay. And we had, if my memory serves me right, originally we had a figure of about £750,000. So we'd estimated what the actual costs would be, and if we applied the new award for pay. What we basically had then was a surplus because the actual figure came out as less than the 750,000 odd that we budgeted for. And so we had a residual amount, which then can be added to the actual surplus for the year.
So that was the case of you over-provided, yeah?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Moving on to page 23, and it mentions day centres, a net budget surplus of 150,000, and that was due to the pandemic. Are there a lot of other savings that are made because we shut down services like that?
Yes, and there are a number of savings which we've had as a result of the pandemic, but also we've had further costs as well because of the pandemic. And fortunately, those costs have been covered by the hardship fund. But yeah, so there have been a number, but off the top of my head, I don't have any further examples for you, unfortunately. But there were a number, but those have been far outweighed by the further costs that we had.
Okay, moving on to page 33, and it mentions there at the height of the pandemic, a number of employees were redeployed, and mentions circa 170 employees were furloughed. And on page 95 of the report, page 95, it mentions in 3 sections, credited to services on the furlough grant, people and performance 380,000, places and transformation furlough grant 67,000, and on corporate furlough grant 8,000. So that's a total of 455,000 credited on the furlough grant. Were these all savings on employee costs due to furlough?
Those would have been savings on those employee costs, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
On my final question, on page 35, it mentions, to page 35, plans for recovery. A recovery strategy is being developed with the aim of establishing a council-wide approach to recovery of the organisation. So a recovery strategy is being developed. What's the timeline on that, and when are we expecting to do that piece of work?
Yes, as part of the recovery strategy, what that actually refers to is the recovery, transformation and improvement plan, is that which has already been approved by council, and the actual investment and in respect to that plan has also been approved, and that was last summer. So
sorry to interrupt. Do you think it would be better to put in there that's to do with the recovery and transformation plan, the RTI plan?
I think that might be best. If you could refer me again, Councillor Chaplin, as to the
Page 35, second paragraph down, it says plans for recovery. A recovery strategy has been implemented.
Yes, that's right. Yes, it is the RTI plan. So
it would be nice to say the RTI, because there's been a lot of work with councils on that. It'd be nice to say that the work's undergoing and, you know, what stage, you know, that it's been more or less completed, a lot of it.
Exactly.
That's my final question. Thank you, Steve, for your help as usual, all right? And that's me finished, Clive, all right?
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, if I could come back on the furlough question as well, where I basically said that was a saving on employee costs. It's obviously what happened with the furlough scheme is that a lot of it was, if I can give an example of our bailiff service, because obviously we couldn't operate that service in the pandemic, then we had a loss of income, and because of that, so the furlough grant really was to assist us as well with that loss of income, because that post couldn't actually work or couldn't actually carry out its functions. And what we also did with some of the furlough grant as well is that the savings there were offset against the additional costs that we claimed through the hardship fund. So I think that gives you a more rounded, more rounded response then to that question.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members? Yes, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a little one, Steve. And this is not knocking your report at all. It's just I'm wondering, maybe in future reports, maybe the covering agenda part is if you could just introduce a little part that says how much departments or how much the council has saved by the work they've been doing, because officers, the people working here, and obviously the cabinet as well, and the opposition, you know, are all working together for the council, and a lot of savings have been made, but a lot is made of what Welsh government have given, you know, their extra money and the extra settlements and that sort of thing. And I just think maybe for morale purposes, it's a lot of these reports later on are kind of doom and gloom, and maybe this would just be a little bit more upbeat and showcase the, you know, the stellar work that everyone has been doing. And it's not knocking your report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Salmon. Yes, that's something we can look at in the future.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? No, if not, I've got two, and the keep on page 35 that Councillor Chaplin was asking about in respect of recovery. One of the paragraphs there in that headed plans for the recovery, right down towards the bottom of that whole piece, it says cross-cutting themes are being addressed by a recovery group who will look to implement policy and procedural change. Remind me, Steve, and members, that recovery group, is that a mix of officers and elected members?
It's in the first instance, that was as part of the recovery group we had initially. That was an officer group originally, but obviously then as we're moving forward and as part of the RTI plan, it's now integrated between officers and members. Right. So it's the recovery group has moved on now slightly from when the actual report is written and for last year.
Right. And that meets on a very regular basis, I presume?
Well, as part of the recovery group, it's been ingrained, I suppose, with our budget board.
Yeah.
In that we just monitor our budgets each month, etc. And it's a case then of understanding what are the outcomes from the investment that we've had as part of the TKI plan. So it's all wrapped up with that board now.
Okay, thank you for that. And can you take it to page 28? And it's the 5th full paragraph down from the top of page 28. And it's referring to February 20 storm damage and the flooding, storm damage on certain areas of the county borough. Assessing the council submitted to the Welsh Government a schedule of capital repair works totaling £8,453,000 for the 3-year period 2021 to 22-23. The council has received notification of 1.9 million support for 2021, but is still awaiting Welsh Government's confirmation of financial support for subsequent years. Have you had any more enlightenment from the Welsh Government on the rest of that money being received, Steve?
We've had a letter last summer from the Welsh Government which basically stated that the cost for this current financial year for 21-22 would be met, although we haven't actually received the monies as yet. The figure we had estimated for the current financial year was £4.6 million. So we've had a letter which guarantees that grant will be forthcoming, but we haven't received it to date. As for 23-24 onwards, I believe that there's still a discussion taking place between Welsh Government and Westminster. From 22-23 onwards, there's still a discussion taking place between Westminster and Welsh Government in the funding of those costs.
Right, and just to be accurate, the fact that still awaiting 4.6 million is, as I understand it, not the fault of the Welsh Government. They've been awaiting themselves these payments from the Westminster Government. That's correct, isn't it, Steve?
That is, yes, that is just correct, Chair.
Right.
Yeah, that is my understanding, that the Welsh Government are still awaiting news from Westminster.
Okay, thank you. If no one else has indicated they wish to ask any questions, are there any comments from members? No. I'd just like to put on record everyone's thanks from myself, and I'm sure from all members of the Audit Committee, of the amount of work that our accountants have had to put in getting these accounts together. We are in still very difficult times with the pandemic, and to have got these done in really a short space of time, I think is something that we as members need to convey to the staff our thanks. Steve?
Yeah, if I could come in as well, Chair, I'm sorry that I missed out to, I should have basically as well thanked Adele for just all the work that she's done over the last 6 months or so, and also the accountancy team. And also I'd like to thank Helen and the Audit Wales team as well for their work over the last number of months in getting the accounts audited.
Yeah, okay, I concur with that, with the Wales audit staff as well. Right, before we deal with the approval of accounts, if perhaps Neil Hollis, if you'd like to take us through the audit of accounts, from Audit Wales, pages 171 to 188.
Thank you, Chair. I work on the basis that the report has been read, so I'm not planning to go over it in a huge amount of detail, but if there are any questions at the end, I'm more than happy to take them. As detailed within the report, similar to 2020, we experienced a variety of working pressures due to COVID-19, which resulted in us continuing to work remotely, conduct meetings with council officers via Microsoft Teams. As detailed by Steve, we worked to a revised timetable as a result of this, and so the work was substantially complete by the end of September. I'd like to add my thanks to Steve, Adele, and their team for their hard work in getting us to that point, because it was difficult working conditions at times, and their cooperation was much appreciated. In terms of matters arising during the audit, we have included an emphasis in matter paragraph with regards to the valuation uncertainty on the council's property assets valued at the 31st of March 2020. We included a similar paragraph in last year's report, and the figure this year that's included is 19.4 million. This relates to those assets which were revalued last year and haven't been revalued since. So for the assets revalued this year, no such uncertainty has been included. I'd also highlight the fact that this isn't a qualification of the accounts, it's just something that we are drawing the reader's attention to. The more significant amendments that have been made to the accounts as a result of the audit are shown in Appendix 3. Just to an apology on this, I think it's detailed as Appendix 4 in the report, whereas it should be Appendix 3. So it's just a formatting error on that, so sorry about that. The main two amendments are a reclassification of 8.8 million between two lines in the debtors note. This only affects lines within that note and has no effect anywhere else in the accounts. And the other one's an amendment of 6.9 million in respect of loans from Welsh Government. Because these loans are issued at a below market rate, the benefit the council receives from getting them at the lower interest rate should be treated as a grant, in the same way as a grant. So it decreases expenditure in the CIS, in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, by 6.9 million, but doesn't have any effect on the general fund, as the entries are reversed out in the movement and reserve statement. There are also some other amendments in that appendix, which are just of a lower value. So yeah, that's all I was going to go through. But if anyone's got any questions, then happy to take any.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any questions from members? I've got one which I'm sure Steve or yourself will be able to fully clarify. On page 187, and it says on the left-hand side, note 32, grant income. I just read that quickly. It's inclusion of a narrative disclosure to explain the agency arrangement with the Welsh Government and resulting transactions included within the statement of account. 22.7 million of the 24.5 million received pay grants to third parties during the COVID-19 response was issued, leaving an amount due to the Welsh Government at the year end of 1.8 million. I'm sure that either yourself or Steve Jones would be able to clarify that.
So these are transactions which aren't included in the income and expenditure statement. It's essentially money that the council is acting as an agent for. So the money is going from Welsh Government to businesses via the council. Does that answer your question? I don't know if Steve's got anything.
Yes, no, it's the very fact that we return in amount of £1.8 million back to the Welsh Government. This is clearly to do with the number of COVID grants that were issued, as I understand it, not in one amount, but there were a number of amounts. Really, the the clarification I was seeking was the amount that we weren't entitled to the full amount of 24.5 million. Am I right there?
And I don't believe so. I think it's just a timing thing. So these are where grants have been received but not yet passed on to the businesses. I think, Steve, is that what you would say as well?
If I could add there, Chair, is what we basically had was offer letters for grants. And the first one was around April 2020. And the offer letters were based on estimates, the best estimates at that possible time.
Yeah.
Or the amount of grants which would be paid out to local businesses. And then we had a series of further offer grants then as we went through the financial year. So what I can confirm is that everybody who was eligible for a grant has actually received a grant. And so what the figures are showing is that the original estimates were just overstated by that £1.8 million or £1.9 million. Hence, that's why there's £1.8 million, which the council has actually received, but it's not entitled to now because the original figures were overestimated as to the amount of grants paid.
Okay. Okay. Great. That certainly clarifies that for me. And whilst we're on the subject, I know that everyone involved in dispersing these grants did a really superb job, and I think that we were one of, if not the best authority in Wales for administering these grants. There was no delay. They went out to those groups and individuals who needed the money at that time. Are there any comments on the report that Neil has gone through for Wales Audit? No? No comments? No? If not, then can I take you back to the statement of accounts for the year ending 31st of March 21. And as I said, we'll carry out the vote in the same way as we deal with at full council. So can I ask if is anyone who wishes to abstain? Do so now. Is there anyone who wishes to vote against? Please do so now. And if there's anyone who wishes to vote for it, please vote no.
Vote is carried, Chair.
That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. If you could please put your hands down now. We'll carry on with the rest of the agenda. And that is item 5. That's in 2 parts. This is from Audit Wales Financial Sustainability. 2 black dots. The first one is the financial sustainability of local government. I presume that's obviously in Wales. And I think Helen Goddard's going to take that first part. And the other one underneath it is headed Financial Sustainability Assessment. That will be taken by Ian Phillips. So over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the first of the 2 reports is a national report which highlights key themes and findings from our work across the 22 councils earlier this year. And then Ian will take you through the Merthyr specific assessment shortly. So just a few key points to highlight from the report. So we found that extra short-term funding has helped the councils in Wales, but long-term challenges remain and uncertainties given these spending patterns are unlikely to be sustained. On the plus side, Welsh councils have generally not used reserves to balance their budgets, unlike some of their English counterparts. So the report discusses the demand for council services arising from the longer lasting implications of the pandemic and the impact on discretionary services given the uncertainty over the future funding levels. So Exhibit 3, so that illustrates at a glance some key facts about council services and highlights the key demand pressures that we're facing currently. So the key findings from our work across the councils was that the costs of COVID-19, so that includes the additional expenditure as well as the lost income, has been mitigated by extra funding received from the Welsh Government, most notably the Hardship Fund of 660 million. Our work reflected the ongoing work by the councils to develop a more sustainable approach to financial planning in the long to medium term, given the impact of COVID is still unknown. Our work on reserves, as per previous years, highlighted a wide range of reserves held by councils from 5% at some to 33% in net cost of services. And a high level reserve enables councils to respond easier to future challenges. Our most recent work on 2021 accounts indicates that all councils increased their reserves during the financial year. So no significant issues raised with council's performance against budget, and savings targets have largely been achieved, aided by the Welsh Government funding during the year, reduced demand for services and also reduced staff costs during the pandemic. Finally, generally councils are in a good position to meet their current liabilities. So to conclude the report, we set out 4 steps to improve financial sustainability. So first is financial strategies. So need to understand the short, medium and long-term challenges and clearly prioritise these challenges. Councillors should be presented with clear choices and planning for different scenarios. Second, with regard to reserves. So planned approach to and use of reserves to ensure long-term sustainability, but also to remember that usable reserves can be an important funding source to support invest to save initiatives. Thirdly, performance against budget. So it's important that both over and under spending are kept under control and seek to manage the budgets effectively throughout the year and act on areas of consistent overspends. And then finally, with regards to savings delivery, understand what is realistic for services to deliver on savings and ensure development of plans include a collaboration between officers, management and councillors. So hopefully that's given an insight into the key themes that we found throughout Wales. Recently as well, we've also published a series of picture of public services reports, one of which refers specifically to local governments. So that includes a snapshot report considering key issues that local governments facing currently. So please do take a look at that on our website. And also, following completion of our 2021 audits, we will publish a financial sustainability data tool, which will be updated annually. So look out for this. Hopefully that will be issued before the end of the current year. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Ian. So if he explains how we undertook our financial sustainability assessment at Merthyr, and then perhaps we can take questions together, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Helen. Yeah, we finalised the local report in early August this year. So the figures were correct at that point in time. Our overall finding for Merthyr is that the council's immediate financial position has improved, but it needs to consider how it best can use its resources to strengthen its financial sustainability over the medium term. The table on page 7 of the local report sets out the costs of the council of COVID over 2020 to 21. All of the council's additional COVID related expenditure and income losses have been covered by Welsh Government funding, apart from 298,000 comprising equipment for home working. And as well as compensating for loss of income and additional expenditure, the Welsh Government provided additional funding for specific COVID related spending. With regard to strategic financial planning, our view is the council needs to take a much more medium to long-term approach to its financial planning, including determining the level of savings it can realistically achieve through transformation and the investment required to deliver the recovery, transformation and improvement, the RTI plan. We've made a proposal for improvement to that effect, which echoes one we made in our assessment of progress to address key concerns report from earlier this year. But we note that the investment required for 21-22 for the RTI plan has been agreed. Our view is that to date, the Council's focus has been on annual budgets rather than planned long-term efficiencies or transformational savings. We note that the Council is in the process of identifying the savings it intends to achieve through its RTI plan, as well as any investments required to deliver on it. We've made a proposal for improvement in relation to the Council's financial planning, in that the Council should include cash flat or minus settlement figures in addition to other more positive scenarios it may wish to use when it projects its future funding gaps. The current MTFP sets out 3 different scenarios in respect to the funding gap up to 24-25. The most cautious scenario is based on a 2% revenue settlement increase from the Welsh Government for 22-23, 23-24 and 24-25. That scenario leaves the Council with an overall funding gap of 13.740 million in total for that period up to 24-25. However, there's no guarantee that a 2% settlement increase will be given for each of those 3 financial years. So in reality, the funding gap could be even larger. Therefore, the proposal for improvement was made to plan for less positive future settlements. With regard to reserves, we note that the Council's general fund has increased and is planned to be maintained in line with its reserves policy. In the period we looked at, which was from 2016-17 onwards, the Council's overall level of usable reserves declined from 22.2 million in 16-17 to 15.9 million in 19-20. But the 2021 provisional outturn reported a significant increase to 25.7 million, noting that the Council received significant extra funding from the Welsh Government at the end of the 2021 financial year. With regard to performance against budget, we note that the Council has significantly improved its previous mixed record and achieved surpluses in the last two financial years. We also note that the Council's recent improved performance against budget has been aided by favourable settlements from the Welsh Government in 19-20 and 2021, a redistribution of joint committee reserves and change in the minimum revenue policy in 19-20, and the significant COVID-19 related funding received from Welsh Government during 2021. With regards to savings delivery, we note the Council has a good track record of meeting savings targets, but those savings in themselves are insufficient to meet future funding gaps. And finally, with regard to the Council's liquidity position, that is relatively weak when compared to other councils, but the Council does not consider this to be a significant risk. Paragraph 23 of the report sets out that this is because it is borrowing in the short term to finance capital expenditure rather than over the long term. That's the current strategy, which is reviewed frequently, and when the time is right, the Council replace the short-term borrowing with longer-term borrowing. So those are the main messages from the local report. We'll be happy to take any questions you might have. So thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions? Bob Williams, I think you had your hand up originally, did you? No. Okay. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. You alluded to it on the about the Council has a relatively weak liquidity ratio compared to other councils. Is it because we have a low level assets compared to liabilities to other councils?
Sorry, just bear with me a second. I'll just go into that part of the report.
Shall I take this one, Ian?
Oh, if you can, yeah, I'm just finding
the
that bit,
liquidity ratio is with respect to the percentage of assets compared to liability. So it doesn't really matter on the magnitude, it's the percentage of each in comparison with each other. So the Council's has got a relatively higher percentage of current liabilities because that's the way they choose at the moment to fund some of that capital. So if they had longer term liabilities, then obviously the ratio would improve because the current liabilities wouldn't be as high. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it's the timing of that we do it over a short period of time, and other councils tend to borrow their debt over a longer period.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor John? No? Okay.
No.
Councillor Barry?
Yeah, if you could indulge me, Chair. Well, we've got Welsh Audit here. I was wondering what the view was of Rishi Sunak has recently come out and said that there'll be real term increase across the board of 4%. And in terms of their acknowledgement that austerity is a failed experiment because it doesn't promote growth, how do you see that claim of 4% from central government finding its way to our bank account? Do you think that's going to translate on a whole? I mean, that's real terms 4%, so it's probably more to us. How do you see that?
To be honest, Councillor Barry, I'm not sure we can really comment on that. We haven't heard anything from our Welsh Government officials about how they're going to pass on any of that. So, but as soon as we do, we're more than glad to have those conversations. But I don't think we're in a position to answer that currently. Sorry.
Okay, not even speculation.
No, best not.
Nice try, Clive. Nice try.
Yes, yes. I could anticipate the answer you were going to be given there, Councillor Barry.
Thanks.
Right. Any other questions from members? If not, I've got one is clarification really. Going back to page 209, the proposals there. The first one is the council should include cash flat or minus settlement figures in addition to other more positive scenarios it may wish to use when it projects its future funding gaps. I know that you've put that in there specific to Merthyr Tydfil, but am I correct in saying that that is something that you've indicated to other authorities in Wales, not just Merthyr Tydfil?
I think each council has its own proposals for improvement. We didn't have a full set of information when we checked this, but a lot of the councils are actually using a 0% as their starting point. Some actually use negative figures as well, but the majority were using 0% as their kind of cash flat worst case scenario. So we're just kind of recommending that the council be consistent with other councils in Wales. Okay.
And going back to your report, Helen, on page 196, there's some interesting figures there, particularly in relation to people sleeping in roof. Look at the figures there, 15-16. That's increased to 405 in 2019-20. And households housed temporarily rose by 24.2% between 2015-16 and 2019-20. When you were putting this report together on a national scale in Wales, did you come across the very vexed question of homelessness and the projected cost of that, in view of the fact that the Welsh government have changed the Act to make it more specific, and the costs that we've been given by the authorities officers, and I understand this applies to every local authority in Wales, is really alarming. Did you come across those concerns and anxieties?
I wasn't involved in the work particularly, Councillor Jones, so I can go back and check with the team that were doing the overall work if you want. I think all councils are concerned about the pressure, and Audit Wales did release a report on homelessness earlier this year, which you may also want to take a look at. But so that's something that I can take away and find out if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think there is general concern from everyone about the cost, the huge cost of trying to implement what is now part of an act in Wales. And that's what I was trying to find out, whether you'd come across that so far. But there's certainly, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council is not alone on
I think, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go on.
Just to reiterate really, Helms, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Merthyr Tydfil's not alone. There is similar anxiety across most councils, I would say. Not that I'm completely cited of every council, but it's certainly a common thread, a common emerging risk. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any comments on any? I know. Oh yes, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, just to emphasise your excellent point there, Chair. I mean, latest calculations are next year it could cost us up to £2.2 million, and that policy alone has got the possibility of skewing the whole budget if we don't get support. So it's across Wales as an issue, and I think it needs to be. The Chair is absolutely right to bring it up, because it is one of the major issues in all authorities across Wales, our understanding is, and it particularly affects us. Different scales, obviously, but the impact nonetheless will be massive on the council if we don't get that support. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barry. If there's no other comments, we are receiving these reports, so if anybody's got any comments, now's the time to say so, but no hands are up. So can I thank you from the staff in the Wales Audit for presenting those reports.
Thank you.
We now come to item 6, and that's the quarterly update work programme and timetable, pages 221 to 230. I don't know if you wish to say anything on that aspect, Ian.
Yeah, just briefly, this is largely for information, and is a relatively new initiative as a result of the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. So it's a general update on our work, and there's also updates from CIWNS as well. If there's any questions on the financial audit work or the local performance audit work to be carried out at the council, then we're happy to take any questions. If there's any wider questions, we may need to take those back to either the relevant study team or CIW or Estin. But really, you're going to be receiving these every quarter. It's up to yourselves really whether these are formal agenda items or just circulated for information. We're happy either way, to be honest. Yeah. Whatever suits you. And it's this is the picture as at the end of September. I can give you a very brief update, latest update in respect of one of the financial audit pieces of work that's referenced. Sorry, the performance audit pieces of work that's referenced, the Spring Forward project. In the update, we say it's planned from autumn 21 onwards. We are taking forward the strategic asset management aspect of that project before Christmas. We're doing some field work at the council shortly. And then in the new year, there'll be a workforce management element to that same project, which will then, those two strands will come together in the final report. So that's kind of a hot off the press update in that sense. But any other questions or comments, feel free to ask.
Yeah, I'm quite happy for this to be agendaed in its format, so that all the audit committee members can see. Yeah, and I know that you have to make on occasions adjustments to it, so at least we can be informed of that.
That's fine.
Thanks. Any questions? Not any comments on that quarterly update? So we'll continue to receive these as quarterly updates. Nobody wishes to ask a question or comment. So thank you again for that, Ian. Then go on to item 7, and that's the updated forward work programme for 2021-22. And Mark, I think you're going to take us through this one, aren't you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will be familiar with this report now. It's to be introduced on next committee meeting and future. Obviously, we not long had an audit committee, special audit committee, fairly recently. So the next items on paragraph 4.2 there is quite a brief agenda at the moment. There may be some additional items linked to the Local Government Elections Act. For example, we need to bring, or the council needs to bring, a report on corporate complaints, for example, but the timing of that needs to be firmed up. So there may be some additional items as we get nearer to the meeting date. And that's all I planned on saying, really. As I say, just to give a flavour of what's likely to be in the agenda, but there may be some additional items as well.
Yeah, thanks. We've all had a copy of it. Has anybody got any questions or any queries on the forward work programme? No, nobody's indicating. Thank you, Mark. Next item is the reflection and evaluation of the meeting. You know, we've, I think, done the necessary. We've all read the papers. We've asked the pertinent questions and we've had the answers. So I'm quite happy with that. Item 9 is any other business deemed urgent by the chair. I have none. Can I thank all of you, staff Audit Wales and our staff and members for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you. All the best.